To exemplify, Mercury and the planets beyond it revolve centrifugally around their primary shaft of gravity in the Sun with ever-increasing slowness, while the speed of rotation upon their own shafts increases so greatly that they are rapidly disintegrated by their own increasing centrifugal speed. This is a characteristic of every electrical effect whatsoever. It is the principle which we call life and growth, which reverses itself to become death and decay. Likewise, there are not two kinds of motion. Motion is the same kind, whether fast or slow. Air is the same air, whether hot or cold. Motion makes believe it is many things and many substances, but these are but many conditions of the same thing. In all this universe we have but two basic fundamentals, rest and motion. Together these two are the pulsating cinema, which constitutes both creator and creation. As the human intellect unfolds, it gradually sees the universe thus simply, and gradually becomes less confused, as man becomes more aware of the reality of mind and less dependent upon motion. An electrically charged body is still a charged body until the last vestige of motion leaves it. Your car battery may be discharged to the last mile, but as long as it can produce motion, it is positively charged. You might properly say that it is approaching a negative or voided condition, but one cannot properly say that a discharging body is negatively charged under any condition. To use such terms as negative electricity or negative charge is equivalent to using such terms as silent sound or dead life. The word negative means to negate, to void, to empty or become minus. To charge means to be added to. It is not logical or proper to use a term such as negative charge, which literally means adding to by subtracting. Electricity is the force used by the Creator to create bodies. Bodies are electrical disturbances in a vacuum. Electricity causes those disturbances. The principle of electronics is a miniature example of what electricity does in a vacuum. A vacuum tube with no electricity dividing it is the normal rest condition of the universe. Electricity emerges from the omnipresent universe and disappears into it, as light appears and disappears in a vacuum tube. Electricity ceases to be electricity when it loses its power to move. When we speak of electric expansion, it is in the sense that it is weakening, just as we say of a man who still lives that he is dying. Electricity does not expand, nor is there a kind of electricity which does expand. It merely weakens by becoming lower in potential and speed. When an electronic tube is evacuated, it means that the electric commotion and tensions which were in it have been pumped out of it, leaving it in a zero state of rest. An electric current sent through it records within it the patterns of motion which caused the electric current. The vacuum condition insulates the new pattern of motion from any other patterns of motion which would otherwise occupy the tube. That same pattern can be projected from that tube and repeat itself anywhere in the universe. That tube is a correct, miniature zero universe of stillness, which is creating a multiple universe of motion. If you will but study that effect, you will gain much of nature's processes. The more that science develops this principle of creating its own patterns by starting them from zero, without interference from other pressures and patterns, and then multiplying them by gravity control within them, the more progress we will make in the practically new science of electronics. The practice of electronics will grow to enormous proportions as electronic engineers begin to know more about electricity and the relation of its pressures to the magnetic universe which controls those pressures. That new science, though still in its infancy, has already made a marked difference in human lives. It will continue to make a still greater mark upon human destiny as it progresses. Its present handicap is its inefficient tubes and projection apparatus. Not any of these have yet been constructed upon the right principle decreed by nature for maximum efficiency. That will come, however, as electronic engineers know more about the secrets of the wave and the radar principle as it relates to the geometry of space. Man progresses only in the ratio in which he acquires new knowledge, and that comes slowly, for man is unwilling to discard old concepts for new. This is not the place for a more extended treatise upon this subject, but we would recommend that each of you become more fully familiar with the daily progress now made in electronics. The one great lesson that you can now learn from electronics without being technical is the fact that whatever patterns you put into those tubes in the ways of sounds, pictures, or movements comes out of them in the same patterns as you put them into them. Let us fully explain our meaning in this respect. The sounds and motion you make do not go into the tube. It is not necessary to tell you that, for you know that nothing goes into the tube but an electric recording of the wave patterns of light and sounds, of the events which waves record. Now here comes your lesson. You can hear and see what you put into that tube as many times as you wish to turn on the current. That means that electricity is the receiving and recording principle of nature, while the zero universe is the broadcasting principle. This brings us to a high point in this book where we should pause for a moment and give deep thought to the realization that the zero invisible universe is the thinking mind energy source of creation, and that all material bodies are but the recordings of mind thinking. Should not every serious thinker readjust his life to seeking values which lie within their source, rather than to continue to seek them in their shadows? In other words, electricity compresses motion into seeming form and effect. That is all it does, however. When that compressed motion is released, to produce a sound, for example, the sound expands into the zero universe without the aid of any force whatsoever. The fact that you can hear the sound is because it is electrically reborn by being recompressed into the density of your body. Your electrically compressed body is a receiving station for reborning the die-in sound, just as a cliffside is a receiving station for reborning the sound as an echo. An electronic tube and a cliffside are alike in this respect. That also means that all matter is but thought recordings, for all matter is electric motion. It necessarily follows that your body is but an electric thought record of your mind thinking, which is operating within the cosmic vacuum tube just as long as you keep it electrically vitalized sufficiently to create the image of you which your thinking is making. That includes every creating thing and its pattern as being thought recordings which act for a while, then refold into little electronic tubes which we call seeds for intervals of rest. When we turn the electric current on to those electronic tube seeds, we can see and hear the record all over again, whether it be ourselves, a tree, or a solar system. Is not that a lesson in immortality? Within the eternal electronic vacuum of nature, every thought and action that has ever taken place during all time lies enfolded there in non-dimensional, omnipresent space. That is one more lesson that the electronic tube might clarify for you, the lesson of dimension. Someday, during your spiritual unfolding of inner sensory perception through meditation, you will become aware of the fact that dimension is but an imaged effect. It might help you to take the first step in gaining this awareness if you will but realize that when you look upon a 50-mile expanse of land, building, people, and events, you see it all within a dimensionless pinpoint of space within your eye. The whole universe is thus reducible to the non-dimension of mind knowing, which has caused the imaged universe to be extended from its eternal zero, which never exceeds zero in cause, but seems to exceed it by dimension in effect. God did, in fact, create the universe in His image, but dimension is as much a part of His imagining as form and events are a part of it. Yes, the above is a wonderful lesson for one who is mystified by the vague idea of immortality. But a still greater lesson of universality awaits deep meditation by you upon the thoughts given above. You have wondered much about the unfolding of a tree or a human body from its microscopic seed. Many years are consumed in that process after you have put the seed in your own yard to generate an electric current for again unfolding the record contained in that patterned electronic tube. The electronic tube seeds of nature have their film patterns enfolded within them. Man has to carry the patterns for this cinema separately, also his projection machine, whereas nature's projection machine is the womb of Earth. It will always reproject the patterned microscopic image into a three-dimensional form if the conditions for that projection are right ones. Now give thought to the little electronic seed tube, which is planted in Africa 10,000 miles away from your yard. Within that microscopic seed, a terrific conflict is being unfolded, a conflict between men, planes, and guns. It is taking place now, this instant, and is being simultaneously unfolded from its recording seed into other seeds in your very room. You can see and hear what is happening 10,000 miles away. You can see the activities of their African setting of desert, palm trees, and a broiling sun right in your room. You can hear the agonized and frenzied shoutings of people who are 10,000 miles away from you. Likewise, 50 billion people like you can hear and see the same events from 50 billion different pinpoints of space upon this planet. Does not that teach you a lesson in the universality and omnipresence of all things? Where, therefore, is dimension or time? If that event is happening within your room now, as an unfolding from an electronic seed, and that dimensionless seed is unfolding in 50 billion rooms, how can you say that it is 10,000 miles and weeks of time away from you? If you place a yardstick upon a mighty oak and measure its many dimensions, and then the oak withdraws those dimensions into its concept as recorded in its seed or in your eye, how can you say that the dimensions you measure were a yardstick and weigh-in scales, with a yardstick and weigh-in scales, have any reality in a universe in which the reality you believe in disappears before your very eyes. Where, then, is reality? Is it in the motion which forever appears and disappears? In the motion picture universe every time the current is turned on to reproduce it from its invisible storehouse? Or is it in the ideal, which is its eternal source? How long will it be before man seeks that reality, which is eternal within him? How long shall it be before he even begins to comprehend the meaning of that command to seek the kingdom of heaven, which is within all men? As we look out upon this vast world of strife, seeing fear in the soul of man instead of love and happiness, and seeing greed there also for worthless quantities of moving matter, and seeing also desires for body sensation rather than mind inspiration, we can but conclude that man is still far from knowing that light within him, which one man, whom man crucified, knew when he said, "I and my Father are one." Our eternal universe. The great telescopes of man have revealed thousands of spiral nebulae in the heavens which give the impression of great pinwheels of fire that appear to be unwinding like huge clock springs, which throw out many stars like balls of fire in misty clouds of fire as they unwind. The spectroscopes of the laboratory have shown conclusively that these nebula are all rushing away from each other with a tremendous speeds. This fact has given rise to the assumption that the universe is running down like a clock, and that when all of these hot nebula have expanded into cold space, the universe will die of a cosmic disease called entropy, which means heat death. The theory which gave rise to this belief is known as the expanding universe theory. This theory, likewise, arose from another theory, which conceived the universe as having had its birth from some giant cataclysm untold ages ago, which caused a huge ball of fire to form. The theory assumed that this cosmic fireball is now splitting up into smaller fireballs and gradually wasting away toward disappearance into the nothingness from which they came. The human senses are easily deceived by what they see when not compensated by knowledge of what is known but cannot be seen. All rivers run forever in only one direction, to the sea. Our senses tell us that, but we are not deceived by the effect into believing that rivers will die, because we know that they are forever replenished by mist and vapors, which we do not so plainly see. Our universe is as eternal as God is eternal. It cannot die, for God cannot die. It is true that all of these nebula are rushing away from each other. They are on their way to disappearance, into the zero from which they appeared. That is the way of all things in nature. That is what is known as the centrifugal downhill flow of the expressed energy of nature. Its uphill flow is the centripetal spiral of its beginnings. The eternal balance in this rhythmic universe divides these two expressions of creation equally. As a matter of fact, the entirety of creation is an uphill flow of expressed energy. Its downhill flow does not require an expression of energy. Its downhill flow is its dissolution. Man can interrupt its downhill flow, however, and make it flow uphill again to multiply potential. Nature continually does just that. Creation is an electric effect of compression. Compression multiplies to accumulate mass. Expansion divides to dissolve mass. Compression is an effort which causes tensions in a vacuous condition. Expansion is that vacuous condition. Motion is always seeking a level. The level exists. Motion simulates existence. It requires effort to divide a lever into two levers, but the two become one without effort. Compression is always two, but expansion is one, which the two eternally seek. Life is an expression of interaction between two levers. I'm saying that wrong. Between two levels. It requires an effort to maintain the two, but the moment that effort ceases, both levels seek the one. That is why life requires continuous effort, but no effort at all is required to die. The expanding universe concept could be true if revised in the following manner. Instead of one great cataclysm which caused one great ball of heat and flame, all at one time in prehistoric times, substitute it for billions of microscopic heat-producing balls for every cubic millimeter of this whole universe. These billions upon billions of atomic units come to life, and end their life in death for a duration of probably 10 billionth of a second. But they have an accumulative power in potential and mass, which adds up into suns. These suns have one life-death frequency in 50 billion years. Time divides and extends as mass multiplies and compresses. Each of the billions of nebula and suns in the heavens is one of those giant cataclysms which must divide itself and die a heat death. They split up into other fireballs, which and I have to say this right here, unfortunately this page is missing, so I can't finish that part of the sentence. It would have been nice, but I will take up where it begins again. Electricity is forever recording the comings and goings, the lives and deaths of God's pulsing thinking. As long as God thinks in pulsing sequences, electricity will record his thinking in the pulsing motion of matter. You must know, therefore, that matter is pure thought. This fact the world must someday know. And then it says genes, but I think they mean Jesus. A scientist of great inner sensory vision prophesied that the world would someday find this out, but he was at a loss to tell the world why. You must also know that every action in human life or throughout nature is an attempt or even an experiment in manifesting the law. Such an attempt may be well out of balance and result in discomfort or catastrophe for man or nature. The reaction, however, is a fulfillment of the law. The reaction restores balance always. The free will of man to create chaos or of nature to create a cyclone are equal, but his free will, or nature's, are limited to the action. The reactions belong to the zero universe of eternal, unchangeable expansion. Unbalanced actions of the transient can in no way affect the eternal, for the eternal is forever omnipresent within the transient. Creation is therefore but a multiplicity of compressed pairs of moving units within an omnipresent expansion, which are forever maintaining a great effort to continue their compressed conditions. The moment they cease to maintain the two levels thus required of them to live, they find rest in the one from which they seemingly divided themselves into two to manifest the one. Compression multiplies energy expression. Expansion takes care of itself for maximum expansion is cause. No energy is needed for matter to die. It is needed only to live. Creation never began and will never end. Such a concept as the birth of the universe theory, now accepted as fundamental, belongs to archaic ages, not to this age. Is eternal. Creation is eternal. You are a unit of creation doing that which is expected of you to do, to manifest the man ideal in action. You must, however, learn that you cannot forever remain as body in the universe of simulation, or make-believe, which motion is. There are intervals in which you must be wholly mind, to learn your part in the drama of creation. You must then reappear on its stage in many thousands of rehearsals, until you manifest the divinity of the man ideal instead of his flesh alone. The time has come when we must now learn that we live in a cosmic, electronic vacuum tube of invisibility, as mental beings who project actions from that vacuum condition to manifest our creative desires. Look within a television vacuum tube for a moment. And I think I'm going to begin this in the next. I will end right here and start there with the next video.